right, good afternoon. You excited about this topic? I have to say, out of my many years speaking at focus conferences, this is my favorite talk to be able to give. And it's always slightly a little bit adjusted as the years go by, but I'm really going to be drawing from this book I wrote called Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love that draws on John Paul II's wonderful teachings from Theology of the Body, and especially an earlier book he wrote called Love and Responsibility. And so we're going to be taking a look at that here today as we examine the great mysterious dynamics between men and women and how we want to navigate those well. And as I think about this, I'm reminded of kayaking. I always think about kayaking when I think about this topic. My wife and I, we were living in Kansas in the early days of Focus. All right. And so Focus, was born at Benedictine College, and so we were... So Focus launched there. My wife was the first woman missionary in Focus and working part-time. And then we would come out to Colorado where we would do our... And I love every state in the country. And the world. Now, so I'm reminded about how in the early days of Focus, my wife and I, we were living in Kansas at the time, and we would go out to Colorado for the summer training where we would train the missionaries. And all the young missionaries would love to go do these adventures in the Rocky Mountains. And one weekend they were going to go kayaking, and they invited us to come along. And we were excited because we were flatlanders at the time. We were living in Kansas, and I thought, well, we never get a chance to do anything like this. Let's go for it. And we got up there into the mountains, and there was a guide who was giving us all these instructions on how to operate the kayak. And I don't remember much of what he taught us that day, but there's one lesson I will never forget. He said this: if you happen to fall out of your kayak, don't try to stand up in the river. Because the river's shallow, so you'll think you could stand up, but it's also so powerful, it'll knock you down. So what you really want to do is just hold on to your life jacket and get above the surface and make it to the side. And so my wife and I, we get into our kayak. I'm in the front seat, she's in the back seat. The rest of our group gets off, and we're going down the Arkansas River. And it was June, beautiful blue skies, and there were still some snow-capped mountains. We're just taking in this incredible scenery here in Colorado as we're going down the smooth, peaceful waters of the Arkansas River. But we knew that we eventually were going to be tested. We knew eventually those whitewater rapids were going to come. And sure enough, I heard the sound of the roar of those rapids coming. And my heart started pounding. All the adrenaline is flowing now. And we go into those waters, and our boat almost capsizes to the left. We get splashed with all this water. We corrected and got splashed all over on the right side, but we pushed through. We made it to the other side. We conquered those first rapids. I was so excited. I turned around to Beth and said, "We did it, honey." And she had a look of horror on her face. She was going like this. Because what happened was when I turned around to celebrate prematurely, the kayak turned sideways with me. And we were now going sideways down the Arkansas River. And the current just carried us all the way around. We did a 180. We're now going backwards down the Arkansas River. And I just let the momentum carry us so we can get straight again. We did a whole 360. I was straight up again, but it was too late. You see, there was a big log that had fallen halfway over the river. And everybody else in our group followed the guide around that log. We were headed straight for it. And I don't know if you know what happens when your kayak brushes up against a log in a powerful river. Immediately, the river sweeps that kayak away. We lost our kayaks, and we're clinging on for dear life onto this log. And it was a big log, and we couldn't pull ourselves over it. The river's trying to sweep us away too, and I couldn't see what's on the other side of this log. I don't know if this is a big deep beaver dam. Is there a bunch of rocks? Is there going to be a waterfall? Am I going to die if I let go of this thing? So I just look at Beth and I say, "I love you, honey. It's been a good first year of marriage." But then our guide came back to us, saw these poor souls dangling there. He says, "It's okay, just let go. You're not going to die. You'll be fine." So we did one of those 1, 2, 3, and we let go. And the river sweeps us away. And I'm choking in all this water. and I have no control of my body, and my rear end is hitting every rock in the Arkansas River. Boom, 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 boom. And I didn't like that feeling. So guess what I did? I just instinctively just tried to stand up because it was shallow. I stood up and boom, the river knocks me down. I'm choking in more water. And out of panic, I tried to stand up a second time. Boom, it knocks me down. And then a third time, boom, it knocks me down. And I remember, oh yeah, don't try to stand up in the river. So I held on to my life jacket. I got above the surface, took in some much needed H2O. I made it off to the side, and I found my wife alive half-mile downstream, and we've not been kayaking since. But I certainly learned a great lesson that day, and that is this. It is really hard to stand up against the current of a powerful river. And I'd also like to say that it's hard to stand up against the current of our culture. In many ways, but especially when it comes to relationships between men and women. Our culture just has a certain way of getting us to approach these relationships, looking at these relationships, and it's really hard to not take that in. We could be devout Catholics, we could go to Bible study, we could go to daily Mass, and we're still very much influenced by this culture. But if we look at what's really happening in the culture, we have to ask ourselves, is that the kind of river I want to be going down? And if we just look at the bigger picture of relationships between men and women, let's talk about marriages. How are marriages doing these days? You know, what do statistics show us? About half of all marriages end in divorce. And there are many college students and young adults that I meet all around the country that they want to get married, but they're nervous. Is it really going to work? There's a lot of insecurity in their relationships. But everyone talks about that side of the picture. But if you remember math class, you had your little pie diagram, the big circle. And you've got half of it shaded in divorce. That's a sad thing, but everybody talks about that. I'm not going to talk about that today. Not because it's not real. I've got dear friends who've gone through the pain of divorce. And I've worked with college students and young people for close to 20 years now, and I've met many of them as they move into their adult years and as they enter into relationships of their own. They describe how, if they grew up in a home like that, how much it affected them, and they realize that only as they get older, how they approach relationships and all. So this is real. I know how hard that is, but I'm not going to talk about that side of the equation. I want to talk about the other half. How are the other half of marriages doing? Are those marriages happy ones? Are those marriages in which husbands and wives really feel close together? They feel like they married their best friend? Do you know what some studies show that about, guess what percentage of marriages are really happy? They have emotional closeness together. Only about 12%. So picture that. Half of all end in divorce. So you got that half. And then on this other half, it's just a sliver of the pie that are really happy marriages. We want something better in our lives. Thanks be to God, they're staying together. That's a good thing. But a great marriage isn't one that just stays together. Just think about that. Imagine we bump into each other at a focus conference a couple years from now, and they say, "Oh, Dr. Sri, remember you talked about marriage. How's your marriage with Beth going?" I said, "Oh, it's great. We haven't divorced yet." That doesn't make a great marriage. Thanks be to God, someone stays together, but when a great marriage is one in which you can look your spouse in the eye 10, 20, 30 years into it and say, "I love you more now today than I did when we were first married." That's what we want to aim for. But if we follow the path of the culture, we're not headed toward a great marriage. And let me ask, how many of you are doing marriage prep? Actually, all of you should raise your hand. If you're called to marriage, you're doing marriage prep right now. Right now, you're doing marriage prep. If you feel called to marriage, the way you interact with the opposite sex right now is forming certain habits that is preparing for your marriage. The way that you approach dating relationships is already forming certain habits. So it's very important the way that you are interacting with the opposite sex right now to develop the right habits that you can take in to your long-term marriage. So a lot of what we're going to look at is going to be very applicable for marriage, but it's also going to be very applicable for right now. Because I meet a lot of people then describing about the kind of insecurities they have in their dating relationships, the fears that they have in their relationships. They're unsure, how do I navigate these relationships? I think John Paul II has a lot to say about these matters as well. I think of a true story of a friend of mine. We worked together many years ago. And she was someone that had a lot of ups and downs in her relationship with men. And there was one time, I remember I'd left the company, had gone somewhere else, and then I got married, and then she sent a gift for our wedding, and I called her to just get caught up, and asked her how she was doing. She said she moved to a new city. And I said, oh, why'd you move there? She says, oh, because my boyfriend lives here, and I just moved in with him. And as soon as she said that, my heart sank, and I thought, oh, no. She's going to go through another train wreck. I could see this. But I didn't say anything. I was just listening, and we talked about other things, old friends and other stuff. And then I came back to the boyfriend. I said, so tell me about this guy. How's the relationship going? Are you happy? And it was a very simple question I asked her. I just simply asked her, are you happy? And there was dead silence on the other end of the phone. And after about 10, 20 seconds of silence, I started hearing a little sniffle, and then some tears, and then outright sobbing. And in the middle of her sobbing, she was telling me, she says, I just moved here 2 weeks ago, and I already know he's not the one. I know he's just using me. And she's just bawling, and she just starts saying, Ted, why does this keep happening to me? Why does this keep happening to me? Why does this keep happening to me? And my friends, what we're going to look at today from John Paul II is not just some abstract theology or philosophy. It's beautiful practical insights that are going to help you prepare for your future marriages, help you experience much better friendships with the opposite sex, much better dating, courtship relationships with the opposite sex, but also it's going to help many people in our world today avoid having to say, why does this keep happening to me, as they follow the plan of the culture and going down that river. We're going to go a different path. We're going to take a look at John Paul II and his vision for men, women, and the mystery of love. Let's begin with a quick prayer here. In the name of the Father, and the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. We'll ask Mary to pray for us as we say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Many years ago when I started teaching on theology of the body, in my very first class, I wanted to get the background to TOB. And that was to go to a work called Love and Responsibility, which he wrote earlier when he was a young priest working with college students. And I remember using my Christmas break down at Benedictine College, down in the crypt of the Abbey there, and I was reading through Love and Responsibility very thoroughly, preparing for the class, and wow, it was amazing. I would read probably about 10 pages an hour, partly because it's so thick, but also I was just deeply, personally moved, challenged, inspired. It was like an examination of conscience, challenging me to think about my relationships with the opposite sex in general, but especially with my wife, and thinking about the ways I fall short of what real love is. And I also saw that in this work, there were so many practical insights that the college students I was going to be teaching there could really benefit from for their dating relationships. Real life relationship issues we face in friendship, attraction, what are the differences between men and women, the way they approach relationships, the two key aspects of love, the role of the emotions, the battle for purity, modesty of dress, you name it. All these amazing topics were in this book. And I was so excited, I wanted to incorporate Love and Responsibility as a textbook now for the class. It wasn't just background. And then when we got into the class, we spent half the semester on the Theology of the Body class on Love and Responsibility. And every time I've taught TOB since, I've always done it this way, because if you know Love and Responsibility well, you're going to be really prepared to understand theology of the body, but more than that, you're going to find it's immediately applicable. As one of my favorite TOB speakers says, TOB is great, but Love and Responsibility changes the way you wake up on Monday morning and treat your wife. It changes the way a college student wakes up on Tuesday and treats his boyfriend or her boyfriend or her girlfriend, her boyfriend or his girlfriend. Gotta be really careful, what we say about these things. But it's immediately practical for all walks of life, and that's what we're going to look at here. I'm going to cover a couple quick nuts and bolts things. So just work with me for about 5 minutes on a couple nuts and bolts things, and we're going to get to the real dynamics between men and women. So the first major point I'm going to cover is what John Paul II calls the Personalist Principle. The Personalist Principle. And it's simply this. It's the golden rule. Treat others, love others as you would want to be treated. Never treat another person merely as a means to an end. John Paul II says each person has their own intellect, they have their own will, they can think for themselves, make decisions for themselves. And so we should never violate that beautiful order and want to use someone for our own purposes. So that's the personalist principle. But the attitude that gets us to use other people is what he calls utilitarianism. Utilitarianism emphasizes the usefulness of anything. Whenever I make a decision, I evaluate how much advantage do I get from this, or what benefit is there for me? What pleasure do I get out of this? What comfort do I get out of this? And I know some things, basic things in life, you make decisions this way. But the utilitarian attitude could get me to look at other persons this way and treat other persons as a means to an end. In other words, I look at this other person in my life not in terms of a friendship or I'm seeking what's good for them. It's more about, what do I get out of this person? What do I get out of this relationship? I only value this person insofar as they're useful for me, or they're advantageous for me to know, or this person gives me pleasure, or this person, I have fun with this person. The problem with utilitarian relationships is that once this other person no longer gives me this great advantage or this pleasure or this fun time, then I no longer value them. And I break off the relationship. And deep down, we all know that we shouldn't use people this way. We shouldn't treat other people merely as a means to our own end, always looking at them in terms of what I get out of them. What do they do for me? But sadly, most of us in this room fall into this all the time. Let me ask you this. I like to ask this question here. If it was Tuesday on campus and a friend of yours comes up to you and says, hey, there's this great new movie being released Friday night. Do you want to come? How many of you would commit on Tuesday to go to the movie Friday night? Some of you would. How many of you wouldn't? Okay, that most of you wouldn't. Why? Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you go? Let's say if you really were free. You were free Friday night, and the movie's okay. You wouldn't mind seeing it. Why don't you commit on Tuesday night to go to that movie Friday? Something better might come up, right? There might be a party that night you'd want to go to, or maybe that girl you're hoping you can go on a date with will be available that night. There's some other option can come up. So you don't commit. You don't say yes right away. Well, then here's my question. Why don't you say no? Why don't you just come back and say, oh, thanks so much for the invitation. That's really kind, but I think I might do something else that night. Why don't you tell your friend no? Because you don't want to be a loser on Friday night. Right, what if there's nothing else better to do? So you at least want to have this as an option. So we often, particularly our generation, we're just so afraid to commit to anything, not just marriage or a relationship, but just what am I going to do on a Friday night? I'm afraid to commit to that. So what we do is we don't tell our friend yes, but we don't tell them no. So instead we say, well, hey, let me get back to you. Let me think about that. I can't commit now, but I don't want to say no to you because you, my dear friend, I want to keep you as a backup. How many of you have done that? It's a form of utilitarianism. John Paul II would actually say that there's an element in which I'm looking at this person more in terms of what I get out of them. And I'm only sharing that as an example of how this attitude can creep into even very good Christian hearts. But now let's talk about men and women relationships. Let's talk about attraction. John Paul II, I think, gives one of the best explanation of the mysterious dynamic between men and women when they're attracted to each other. So let me throw out a certain scenario. Imagine there's a certain coffee house back on your campus, okay? And there's a man sitting in that coffee house, sipping on his coffee, and he happens to notice an attractive woman walking in. He immediately puts down his book. He's drawn to her beauty, and his heart stirs. And he keeps wanting to look over at her. But this attraction is more than physical. He's seen her here before with her friends at this time, which is why he's here again at this time. And he's been drawn not just to her beauty, but also to her warm personality, her cheerful smile, her kindness to her friends. So there's something more than physical going on. These kinds of attractions happen all the time. And many times they happen very quickly. We don't have to work at this. This just kind of happens, right? Some man could go into the grocery store and notice an attractive woman walking by, boom, he's interested. Or there's some woman at church, she goes up and receives communion, and on the way back happens to notice there's a new guy here at daily mass. Wow, I wonder what he's like. And starts thinking about him and the rest of the day. I wonder if he's going to be at mass tomorrow, and I wonder what my wedding dress is going to look like with him. You laugh, ladies, but you know it's true. You've told me. I've talked to college students around the country for over a decade about this, that this really happens. One little thing like that might happen like that. But what's going on when a man and woman are attracted just immediately like that, or if it's something that develops over time through friendship? What's going on there? John Paul II talks about how we're attracted to the sexual values of a person. Now, he also emphasizes that every person has value as a person. Just as a son or daughter of God, you have value beyond your physical looks, your physical features. Beyond that, you have value as a person. But we find ourselves also more immediately attracted to the sexual values that God gave each person. Now, what are these sexual values? If I had a little diagram on class, I'd have the big word sexual values here. I'd have two arrows coming down like this, one here and one here. And under sexual values, I would have two things. One, I would have, it's the physical qualities of the person on this side. And then the other part of the sexual values is the psychological qualities of the person. And we find ourselves very attracted to the physical qualities and the psychological qualities. The physical qualities, this kind of attraction, it's a physical attraction. It's what John Paul II calls sensuality. It's a sensual, physical attraction to the physical features of the other person. Their good looks. So they're good looks. We're attracted to their physical features, to their body. But we're also attracted to something more than just the good looks. We're attracted to their psychological qualities, John Paul II says. And he calls this an emotional attraction, sentimentality. And he describes this as an attraction to the femininity of the woman or to the masculinity of the man. Now, he doesn't really define femininity and masculinity. And many people often ask me, well, what does he really mean by that? And I said, well, I'll tell you what he says in the book. He didn't really say much. He just says, a woman is attracted to the man's masculinity, and then he puts in parentheses, strength. And he says, and the man is attracted to the woman's femininity, and then he puts in parentheses, charm. And that's all he gives us. So I wish he gave us a lot more, but back in 1950s Poland, there wasn't many questions about what it means to be a man or a woman back then. But what I think he's getting at is simply there's a certain mystery to the opposite sex. There's a mystery of the woman that we're attracted to that's beyond her physicalness. There's a mystery of the woman and there's a mystery of the man that we end up being attracted to. And it ends up being an emotional attraction. So you got this? We got two main ways that we're attracted. I just want to make sure you're following because this is the key to unlocking everything else, all the fun stuff we're going to get into next. But we've got a physical attraction called sensuality to the body of the person. And then we also have this emotional attraction to the mystery of the woman, the mystery of the man, the femininity and masculinity. Okay? Now, God put these qualities in us and made us attracted to those physical qualities and psychological qualities so that then we would be led to the person who possesses those qualities. So they're kind of like the nice diamonds that sparkle and draw attention. But just like the diamond earrings are not meant to, a lady doesn't want the guy just staring, oh, wow, those are amazing diamond earrings. I quit looking at me. I just want to look at your diamond earrings. No, the lady wears the diamond earrings to draw ultimately attention to herself. And these are the beautiful things that God has given us, these physical and psychological qualities that are meant to draw us to the person. And remember, every person has value beyond their physical and psychological qualities. The challenge is that sometimes we focus just on those qualities. We focus just on those things because we get a certain pleasure, a certain enjoyment out of them. And we have to realize that these qualities, they don't exist in the abstract. They exist in concrete, real human persons. They don't exist in the abstract. What do I mean by that? What does John Paul II mean by that? It means that there's no man that goes around and he's attracted to blonde in general. Like he's looking, oh, I just love blonde. Where's blonde? I need blonde. Where can I find blonde? You don't have that. He may be very attracted to a particular woman a particular concrete human person, a woman that has blonde hair, but he's not attracted to just blonde. And there's no woman that's just attracted to masculinity. Like, just imagine some woman, I need masculinity. Where's masculinity? I got to find masculinity. Where's masculinity? No, she may be very attracted to a particular man that is very masculine, very chivalrous, very decisive, but she's not attracted to masculinity abstract. These qualities reside in concrete persons, and God wants us to be loved as a person. That's what's on all of our hearts. We want to be loved as a person, and we want to love others in a relationship as a person. But the problem is sometimes we get too caught up with the physical and psychological qualities that give us pleasure, and we end up using other people for those qualities. A great way of looking at this is to see the difference between animals and persons and how they respond. Animals react just on instinct. It's like a reflex mode of action. The animals their sexual, the way that they're wired sexually is not dependent on any thought, no deliberation. They just act. And you see this with all their appetites. Say, their hunger for food. If I were to bring a hungry dog in here that hadn't eaten for several days, and I brought a big steak right up here, a big juicy steak, and here's that dog, and I put him right here, and I show him the steak, is that dog gonna run up here and go, oh wait, it's a Friday in Lent? Or, oh no, wait, I'll let the lady dogs go first. No, the dog's just gonna go in and act on his appetite, right? That's what a dog does. He just acts on instinct. Similarly, a cat in heat. When a cat is in heat, the cat doesn't go around the different alleyways looking for the perfect male cat. Oh, I choose you to give myself to you in good times and in bad, sickness. No, a cat doesn't do that. The cat just acts, right? That's how animals work. But we, John Paul II says, we as human persons are different. We're not meant to be enslaved to our passions and to our appetites. We can rise above these desires and attractions. That's why it's so sad where our culture, in this big, powerful river, just tries to enslave us to our sexuality. So we can't really even control it. We just have to give into it and fulfill it and satiate it every time we experience sensual desire. That's so sad, because at that point we're living like animals, whereas we were made to be something so much greater as human persons. So John Paul II says we're capable of rising above the sexual urge. We're not meant to be enslaved to it. In fact, our God gave us a mind, He gave us a free will, so we can deliberate, we can choose what to do with these initial attractions. And that's the key for us as we move forward here, is that we must have great responsibility for when we notice those initial stirrings of attraction, whether it's a physical nature or even just an emotional nature. We must have great responsibility with what we do with those. Nothing wrong with noticing, wow, very attractive woman. If you happen to notice a beautiful woman, guys, that means you are just working really well. You're operating the way God made you. That's a wonderful thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Or if your heart stirs and you happen to be thinking about a certain woman that you saw earlier in the day and you have an emotional attraction to her and you have good feelings, there's nothing wrong with that. The question is, what do you do with that? Do you allow those initial desires to lead you to go then just use this person physically, which is one thing we can do. One of the main ways we can use someone is sensually. We can use them sensually. We can use them with whether physical actions or even just in my own thoughts, in my own mind, my own imagination. And this is why John Paul II says when we have lustful thoughts for someone else, people wonder, am I really hurting anyone when I have a lustful thought? What's the big deal, But we are hurting someone when we do that, because when I actually look at someone lustfully, I take this woman and I reduce her to a mere body. I'm reducing her to a body, not a person, but a body that I can exploit for my own pleasure, for my own enjoyment. And that woman has so much more dignity than that. And when I do that, I keep training myself. The more I give in to lustful thoughts, the more I'm training myself to look at women this way, which makes it hard for me to really love them. And one day if I get married, I'm speaking I in the general, I am married, I've got 7 kids, I'm very married. So, but one day if a college student that wants to get married, if they have habitually looked at women this way, they're gonna look at their spouse this way. And they'll end up treating their spouse as just an object to use for their own sexual release, as opposed to a beautiful gift from God that they're called to cherish and care for. and in many times abstain in sexual relations with for her good and her happiness and the good of your marriage, and not just use her for your own pleasure. So it's very important that we avoid using people sensually. But there's a lot of people that talk about that. There's a lot of chastity speakers out there, and they all talk about why we need to be chaste. So there's a lot of great resources out there. I don't think I need to touch on that. What I'd love to talk about is the other side of attraction, because that's not something many people think about, that we can end up using people this way, and that's our emotional attraction, our sentimental attraction toward others. John Paul II says that today he's concerned that we fall into sentimentality that hinders love from developing. He said, today, love is often reduced to feelings. Now, he wrote this in the late 1950s. Today, love is often reduced to feelings. Now, imagine this. This is John Paul II in Poland in 1950s saying love is often reduced to feelings. What would he say today? Oh, my goodness. Feelings that's how everyone measures love. If I want to know I'm in love, I check my feelings, So if my feelings are really strong, then it's great. Or if my feelings aren't there, then it must not be love anymore. John Paul II says, okay, feelings aren't bad. They can be a part of a relationship, but they should be a part of a relationship. And I'll clarify that, because a good relationship isn't feelingless. I mean, imagine if I go home to my wife and say, Beth, I love you. I'm committed to you. I'll never leave you. I would die for you, but I have no feelings for you. I mean, that's not an ideal marriage, right? Because the emotions actually help unite the two worlds of each individual together. So I feel like this other person understands me, I understand them, we're sharing life together. So that's a good thing. The challenge, though, is that if we make feelings one of the key aspects of love, we're going to be misled. John Paul II said, feelings are often misleading. He, in fact, said, feelings are blind. Feelings are blind. Why does he say feelings are blind? Our culture says, trust your feelings. Like Obi-Wan, trust your feelings, Luke. Trust your feelings. It's your feelings, just will guide you in a relationship. And John Paul II is saying, actually, no, don't trust your feelings. Nothing wrong with feelings, but you want to trust something else more. And what's that something else? Your mind. He says feelings are blind. Feelings don't discern what's true, what's really happening in a relationship. God gave us the different parts of the soul. So I'm going to give you, in 1 minute, basic theology 101. We all have an intellect, a mind, which discerns what's true. And we're all given a will, free will, so we can choose, and we're meant to choose the good. And we're also given these passions, these emotions, and originally, all of those passions, emotions were good. They were ordered properly because they helped us pursue what was true and good with the full intensity of our passions. That's how God made us originally. But what part of the mind, what part of the soul figures out what's true? What part of the soul figures out what 2 + 2 is? What part of the soul? Your mind. It's not your will, and it's certainly not your emotions. And so just imagine if in your math class, and the teacher says 2 + 2 is 4, and someone raises their hand and says, no, I think 2 + 2 is 5. Because for me, I just feel that it's 5, All right. I just get these warm, fuzzy feelings when people shout out in my talk. There we go. But just imagine somebody just saying, well, for me, 2 + 2 is 5. I get these feelings, because 5, you got the 2 straight lines, and then there's a curve, and it just feels so right for me. You go, this guy's crazy, right? But yet when it comes to someone's relationship, they often turn right there and they go, well, for me, this feeling just feels like this is the right relationship. But we wouldn't do that with most other things in life. Now, before the fall, as I mentioned, God made us so we could see the truth clearly, and it was easy for us to choose the good, and all of our emotions were ordered to help us pursue what's true and good. But after the fall, what happened? After the fall, we don't see things, we don't always know what's right as easily. We have to work harder at it. And I might know what's right, but I don't do it all the time. I say I'm going to get up, but I don't get up at this time. I say I'm going to do this work, and I procrastinate. I say I'm not going to eat this thing, and I still eat this thing. So my will is weak. But what's going on in our emotions? Are our emotions properly ordered? No, our emotions are going all over the place. Our emotions are crazy. Sometimes I'm happy, and I'm really sad. I'm frustrated, and now I'm excited. And our emotions are all over the place. And yet, our modern world is telling us, if you want to know if you're in love, if this is a really good relationship, if you should stay in this relationship, or is this the kind of guy you want to date, where do you go to search that? You search right here in this mess called feelings. That's what the modern culture is telling us. Now, nothing wrong with checking in on feelings, but know that we want to bring our mind into the game. We want to bring our mind into the game. We want to ask important questions and not just be led by, oh, he's so cute. Or, oh, she's just so beautiful, and I like this about her. And that's all fine. But we got to ask some really good questions. So a gal, for example, needs to bring her mind into the game of a relationship with another man. She's got to ask a lot of questions. Is this the kind of man that's going to work his tail off for you? Is this the kind of man that's easy for him to deny himself, to make sacrifices, to serve other people? Do you notice him sacrificing to serve his roommates, to serve on campus, interacting with his family and serving his mom and his brothers and sisters? Do you notice that? Or is this the kind of guy that just sits and watches ESPN all the time and plays video games all day and entertains himself all the time? Because if it is, probably if he's always just entertaining himself, it's probably not easy for him to sacrifice and serve you and any future children you may have together. Guys, you need to be asking more than, hey, is she a good-looking gal? Oh, wow, she's just great to be with. We got to ask more than that. We got to ask, can this woman carry a lot of weight? And I don't... Wow. Can this woman carry a lot of weight? And I don't mean physical weight, although that happens when she gets pregnant, but more, can she shoulder a lot of responsibility? Because motherhood is incredibly demanding. Being a mom isn't just about, oh, I got this cute little baby and it's fun to have kids. It is incredibly demanding. A mom is constantly laying her life down for her children. It's not about comfort. And is this the kind of woman that has the character, the virtue, that is going to be able to pour her life into any children that we may have? These are many questions we should ask, but those are some of the things that we should be considering. But sometimes we're just so eager to find love, so driven to find that perfect person, that our emotions take over and we don't see the truth clearly. And we allow ourselves to end up idealizing the other person. And our culture in this big river here just constantly takes advantage of us, with all the music that's out there. Most of the love songs, think of the average love songs. They're all about either sex or they're going to be about emotions and feelings. And there's nothing wrong with talking about, the good feelings that one may have together, but really, how many love songs are actually about sacrificial love and virtue, which is really what love is all about? To will the good of another, to seek what's best for another person, even when it means pain for you, sacrifice for you, self-denial, taking the cross up. That's what real love is. And yet most of the love songs out there don't focus on that. All the love songs are all about, all I need is you. It's like, I'm sorry, you've lived up to this point without this person. You can live without this other person. Or, I can't live without you. Yes, you can. So there's all these false songs that are very hyper sentimental. And then there's all these movies out there. The average chick flick out there is all just about, they can fall in love, they meet someplace, and now there's a little conflict, and then it's all resolved. If I just had someone like that, it'll be perfect. And don't think that those movies don't affect us. I tell you, I've met people. I do conferences like this for young adults. I do conferences for married couples around the country. And I remember once flying to a country, to somewhere in Pennsylvania, and there was a woman sitting next to me, and she was telling me, all right, Pennsylvania, she was telling me, or she was asking me what I was traveling for. I was talking about my talk and sharing some of these ideas, and she said, yeah, gosh, I've been married 20 years, and we've had so many hard times, and I wonder if it's because I think I've always been thinking my marriage was going to be like those love songs I listened to all the time. And I hear what you're saying is that maybe love is more than that. And I'm like, absolutely, it's a lot more than that. A lot of young people think, well, love is just, we're going to be really Catholic even, and we're going to just have love. We're going to sit by the fire together when we're married, sip wine, hold hands, and quote Theology of the body to each other. It's just going to be beautiful. Let me just tell you, that is not what the average married life is like. I tell you, most marriage life, especially once you have kids, is much more about this. Okay, I come home, all right, we got the kids cleaned up. Okay, all right, you got the kids, they got that kid brushed in teeth. Oh, no, this kid got poopy diaper. Okay, got to work on this. All right, kid's no longer naked. We've got this kid, we fed the hungry. We gave clothed the naked. We visited this person in timeout over here. Okay, this is great. All right, we got the kids down. They said their prayers. They're asleep. Are you okay, honey? I'm okay. Good night. Constant dying to oneself. But that's what love is these two people were working side by side each other to serve some greater good outside of us. That's real love. The problem is most of us think love is this. We're just going to stare in each other's eyes and it's about, oh, I give you these feelings, you give me these warm feelings. It's just so great being together. But real love goes outward. It's not about just gazing in each other's eyes and so self-enclosed. That's a dangerous kind of love that's going to probably collapse. A real love is when two people can go shoulder to shoulder and look outside of themselves and serve a greater good outside themselves, some mission outside themselves, most especially their children. And that's all about self-denial. The problem is, again, that's not in the average love song. You don't hear that, and that's not in the average movie out there. How many of you saw the movie Titanic of the 90s? How many of you saw? Okay. Guys, you can raise your hand too. You saw it. Come on. You own that Celine Dion CD. Come on. Admit it. All right. You know, and so many people have thought of that movie as this, what a beautiful vision of love. Isn't this just great? This is just the perfect vision for love here. You know, he dies for her, you know. And that's true. That is a noble element. That's one noble element of love in Titanic. It was Jack died for Rose. That was a good thing. But I would say the rest of the movie is almost as big of a disaster as the original shipwreck in terms of its in terms of its vision for love. I think. And I'm serious here. Think about what happened. I met so many women that love this movie, and they're all just, I just wanted that kind of love. You know, why did the ship have to go down? You know, their love would have lasted forever. But I want you to bring your mind to the game. Now, by the way, did you know that there have been many that teenage women, there were studies showing this. This is true. Teenage women would go back over and over again and watch that movie in the theater when it came out. They kept over and over and over again. Then when it came out on DVD, they watched, many teenage girls watched that movie like 7 times when it first came out. Did you know that? Do you know why? Because teenage women love movies about boats. No, just kidding. No. No, because I think it totally connects with our modern culture's hyper-sentimental, total emotional understanding of love. But ladies, bring your minds to the game. And guys, you can do this too. Bring your minds to this movie. That's what you should do with every movie. Bring your mind to the movie. Don't just be swept away. Ask the questions here. Is this the kind of guy you would want to marry? Let's talk about this. First of all, how long did Jack and Rose know each other in that movie? 3 days. 3 days, right? And then even on those 3 days, they didn't spend that much time together, right? Because she's in the first class deck, he's way down below. So even in the 3 days, they barely saw each other. And then, what does Jack do for a living, by the way? Do you remember? He's a painter, but what does he paint? He doesn't paint trees and forests. What does he paint? Naked women. Is that the kind of guy you want to marry? You know, but they just, but it's just so beautiful. You know, the real picture of love. You had to pick a picture of love. This is what love is in Titanic. Remember this? Remember that scene? Up at the front of the ship. Do you know, my wife read an article a couple years after the movie came out, said that cruise liners had to put a security guard at the front of the ships after the movie came out. Seriously. Because all these girls would take their boyfriends on the ship and said, just hold me like Jack held Rose. We'll play Celine Dion in the background. It'll be perfect. Then I'll know you love me. But that's not real love. You know, what happens is we often idealize. I want to read you a quote from John Paul II here about love. He says, when we're emotionally attracted to someone else, the other person grows in value enormously, as a rule, out of all proportion to his or her real value. So when we become emotionally attracted to someone else, he says, as a rule, this other person grows out of all proportion to their real value. In other words, we all do this, so don't deny. If you think, I've read Theology of the Body, or I came to Focus Conference, I'm in a Bible study, I control my emotions, you're a liar, or you're deceived. John Paul II makes it very clear this is as a rule. This is just what happens normally because our emotions, we're fallen human beings, they get out of whack. And this is going to happen to the best of us. We just have to be aware of it. And we tend to exaggerate the person. We meet somebody and we exaggerate them, make them to be like this great saint on a first meeting. This happens all the time. We idealize other people. There could be, again, woman shows up at the Newman Center for some social event, some new guys there, and they talk for 20 minutes, and she can't stop thinking about him, and think, oh, maybe this is the one. And that can happen, guys, in a 20-minute conversation, by the way. That does happen sometimes. And so all of a sudden exaggerate this other person. I met this guy at the event. He's a good Catholic. I talked to him for 20 minutes. He must be like Blessed Pier Giorgio, just a perfect holy saint. This is going to be wonderful. There's a guy I knew that I went to college with, and he did this over and over again with gals. He would just idealize these girls that he would start dating. And then he'd break up with them, or get dumped a couple weeks later. It was just crazy. It happened all the time. He had this one line that would always come up. He would talk about, oh, she's a lot of fun. She's really athletic. That was really important to him, that she was athletic and liked to run or something, things like that. Or she was very caring. And then he would pause and say, you know what? She reminds me of my mom. And every time he gave that mom line, I went, oh, no, here we go again. But you could tell he was searching for something. He was longing for this ideal person. And so he meets someone that has just a sliver of that ideal, and all of a sudden, boom, magnifies her qualities, makes her out to be something much greater than she really is. Why do we do this? We do this, in the end, John Paul II says, because when we think that this might be Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, Mr. Perfect, Mrs. Perfect, we get a lot of emotions from that. So when I can magnify and exaggerate this person's qualities, I get this rush of emotion, this eruption of emotions coming. I just can't stop thinking about this person. I go to the holy hour. I'm praying for this person. I'm just praying about this person. I'm not really talking to Jesus anymore, but it's all about this other person. This is great. And so I'm just thinking about this person so much, and I get so much good feelings out of it. But am I really loving the person? I'm loving this ideal I created and not the real person, himself or herself. And we tend to do this because we're longing to find this ideal person with all our heart. And so we notice one small quality and we exaggerate it. But when we do that, what I want us to see here is we're really just using the person. We're not really loving them. We're not even loving the real person. We're actually just using them to exploit them for our own emotional pleasure, so I can get this big rush of emotion. I saw this all the time. When I remember teaching at Benedictine, Benedictine was a very Catholic campus, and all the students have to talk about, we got to be very Catholic. We don't date at Benedictine, we court. So it's very serious, and they have to follow all the right rules and all, and we're going to do this all right. And so it's all noble. I'm not making fun of it, but just giving you like sense of the environment on the campus. So you have many people doing it this way, and so they'll start a relationship, and you'd see these people. They'd go for late night walks together. They would pray. They pull out their rosary beads, and they'd walk along the bluffs there and pray the rosary. So it sounds all very holy, and they go to Mass, and they sit next to each other at Mass because Jesus is right there, and then at the Our Father, they get to hold hands, kind of in that special way, so they're there, with Jesus, and they pray after Mass, and it's all sounding really wonderful. And I can remember the freshmen would look up at this couple and go, wow, what an ideal couple. I hope I can find a boyfriend or a girlfriend like they have. That's a wonderful relationship. And then all of a sudden, they break up, and they hate each other's guts, and it's really awkward anytime they see each other on campus. They don't really talk to each other anymore, and everyone's wondering what happened. The freshmen are all discouraged. Oh, my goodness, how did that happen? And I go, totally, I know what happened. It's called idealization. When we open up so quickly sometimes in a relationship, sharing our heart, sharing our emotions so much, then it creates a false sense of where the relationship is really at. So we want to be careful and not just kind of open up all of our emotions and bare our souls together so quickly. We want to be cautious and gradually unveil ourselves. And be very careful that we're not falling into the idealization of the other person. True story, there was a campus in the South many years ago. Curtis tells this story, actually. It was with Campus Crusade, and they one spring semester, they had men's Bible studies, women's Bible studies, but they decided to set up prayer partners between the men and the women. Okay, so every man had a woman prayer partner, and they would get together and pray together, pray for each other's needs, share each other's what's going on in each other's life, and they did this in spring. So here they are, and you could guess what happened with all these prayer partners. Many of these prayer partners became dating couples eventually, right? and they all started falling in love with each other. And then summer break happens, and then they're away from each other for 3 months in the summer, and then these couples all come back together in the fall, and guess what happened in their relationships? Most of them broke up. What happened there? It caused a big problem for the ministry for them. But what happened was, in the spring, he's sitting there, he's saying, okay, dear God, I pray for Sally here, and she's going to go home for spring break. She has some difficult situations with her mom and dad, and I just pray that you send your Spirit to give her guidance and wisdom, and know that you're going to be with her, and that she'll know that I'm praying for her every day. And just imagine some woman hearing some man praying for her this way, and it's like, oh, wow, what a good, godly man. And, they're sharing each other's life in this way. And when we have that very emotional relationship, bearing our souls to each other, especially early on in a relationship, that's very dangerous for creating a false sense of where the relationship really is. So let me conclude by highlighting the big picture here. We've seen two main ways we're attracted to each other. We're attracted sensually, physically, and emotionally. But if we focus on these two aspects to guide our relationships, we're really not going to grow in love. This is what John Paul II calls an immature love. An immature love. He says this is not love. He says this is just a psychological experience that they're having together. They like each other's bodies, they're attracted to each other's bodies, and they get these emotions from each other. That's all it is. That's not love. Real love, a mature love, is a love that is characterized by self-giving, where I give of myself in love to this other person. And this is the key thing I want you to see here. In immature love, what am I doing? Utilitarianism. I look at this other person more in terms of what do I get out of them? I get emotions from them, or I get physical pleasure from them. And when we're in a relationship like that, deep down, if we're on this side, we're fraught with insecurity and fear because we deep down know this other person's just using me. If I bring anything up that might make this person upset, they're going to want to break up with me. There's no real vulnerability. There's no real exposure of this is who I am, and I'm really being loved as a person because I deep down know this other person's using me. We've got to get out of an immature love. That initial attraction has to grow into self-giving. And what is self-giving characterized by? The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches what love is. Love is to will the good of another. It's to seek what's best for the other person. So in this kind of relationship of authentic love, I'm looking at the other person not in terms of what I get out of them, but more, I'm giving myself to them. And I'm serving them. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about me serving them, it's also about then we together as a team starting to serve other people. And people ask me all the time, what should I do if I'm going into a dating relationship with someone? How do I make sure I don't close in on ourselves and it's just that eye-to-eye, face-to-face kind of relationship that is closed in on itself? How do I avoid that? Try to do things in groups. Try to do things, you need one-on-one time, yes, but try to do a lot of things with other people and do things where you're serving other people. You're serving in your campus ministry. You're serving in Focus. You're serving on your campus. You're going out of yourself. The more you're doing that together, you're actually developing the habits that you need for your future marriage. And that is a relationship characterized by self-giving love. And that is the conclusion of what I have to say, at least for now. I have so much more I'd love to talk about,